My name is Beth Claypool. I'm the Epsilon Sigma Phi Chair for Global Relations. And so we hosted a seminar about this time last year. And as a result of that, we did get feedback from folks that said they were interested in identifying others who have similar interests and how to connect with other international work going on around the country. So in the process of finding out how we might give you all that information, we found Rene. So Rene Pardo is very well known in these circles. She's part of the community practice for Internationalizing Extension, and she's with the University of Minnesota. So Rene Pardo today will describe her work, especially the international database, and demonstrate its use. Rene currently is the Assistant Dean for the University of Minnesota Extension and Endowed Chair for the Minnesota Institute for Sustainable Ag. So it's been a pleasure getting to know Rene over these last couple of months and trying to make connections with folks and getting the word out about what's going on nationally about international work. So I wanted to let you all know, too, that I will be sending you out a link to a survey instrument here in the next couple of days. Bear with me on that. We had a glitch this morning. And then hopefully we can get feedback on that and then determine what the next steps for something similar to this might be in the future. So I'll hand it over to Rene.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. Big thanks to Mark. Besides being the best host for every e-extension webinar I've done so far, I think he's somewhat of a fabulous DJ. I love the music. It gets me moving a bit and reminds me of the 80s, dancing to the Love Shack. And thank you to Beth for organizing this webinar. So I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me. And Mark, can you confirm that you're seeing my slideshow?
That looks wonderful.
Thank you very much. So let me do this. So welcome again. My name is Rene Pardo. I'm from Minnesota. And today I'm going to be showcasing the Global Network Survey tool that has been developed, as well as the Snowball database that drives the survey tool and provides us with an enormous amount of data that can help us, I believe, to be relevant into the future for the U.S. cooperative extension system as we become more globally connected, as well as our demographics continue to change. So just a little bit about myself. I grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and the diversity that I experienced actually was around religion. I went to Catholic school. Every Sunday, we drove to church, and I spent the time with my dad looking for a parking spot because he actually was Baptist, so it took us a while to find parking to go to church. But we spent weekends and time after school and summers at the Jewish Community Center. So my diversity actually was a religious diversity. And to this day, Judaism has impacted me in regards to the importance of lifelong learning as well as social justice. Now today, fast forward 50 years or so later, I live in a neighborhood that's extremely diverse. The diversity cuts across abilities. We have people that are able-bodied as well as people that are manually operating wheelchairs or mechanically operating wheelchairs. We have people of all ages, little babies being born, as well as the senior home right down the street. We have recent immigrants. We have the new Korean population that lives in my neighborhood. They're actually foraging mustard greens and fiddleheads in people's yards, creating an interesting tension, as well as second, third, fourth generation immigrants, be it Hmong immigrants or Hispanic or Somalian immigrants in the neighborhood. We have diversity in regards to wealth. We have people on Section 8, on food stamps, as well as people who live in multi-million-dollar homes. So the diversity today is dramatic compared to what I experienced growing up. And I believe most of us are experiencing that diversity across our states. And so that's one of the reasons why I believe Extension needs to internationalize our work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that now. So today we're going to talk a little bit about why do we really care, and then we're going to actually jump into the details of the survey tool and the database that drives it. For some folks, this will be extremely boring, and for others, it will be extremely exciting because it's database and surveys. But I just want to show you the extent of the data that we have and that you could use to inform some of the decisions that you make. And then we'll talk a little bit about ways on how we can all get involved in this work. So I think about the work that we do is about the global dynamics and cultural knowledge. And what do I mean by global dynamics? I mean Our ability to take into account the global realities, be it agricultural realities, political, social, cultural, environmental realities that actually affect us locally. So for example, many of us have friends or family that are in the military. The conflicts that they're involved in are someplace else. They're not in the United States, but they're affecting us locally. Also, with the introduction of women in combat, it has a social effect on our culture as well. And we think about coffee, for example, and every major coffee producing region today, they're experiencing higher temperature coupled with intense rainfalls and long droughts as well, which increases pests and diseases, which has decreased coffee production, which affects us locally, at least those of us who like to drink coffee. We can think of Brexit. Some of us may have some direct experience with Brexit going on, and some of us may not. It's really unclear how it will affect us. We do know that England is 1/6 of the European Union economy, and that will affect the United States in one way or the other. The US Federal Reserve is already positioned to respond to different changes that could occur because of Brexit. We think about our trade with other countries in the world. The United States trades about 1,200 different products and commodities we export, and we export to about 235 countries. And in 2016, our exports reached over $2.5 trillion. So we're economically connected globally, if we like it or not. And finally, some of us who are into rock and roll may remember the band in the center there. That's AC/DC, and may have influenced us in the 80s, listening to Highway to Hell and our Bic lighters and so forth. So taking a look at the global dynamics and how that affects us locally, I believe can influence the work that we do in regards to our research and our education and our outreach. And when we think about our grand challenges and the need to work across disciplines, these are issues that I think can drive our work. Now let's take a little bit a look at what I mean by cultural knowledge. So cultural knowledge really refers to the understanding of the variety of cultures that represent our audiences, our partners, our stakeholders, and our colleagues. So having an understanding of our current and future demographics, as well as our historical demographics, really helps us work across cultures. It helps us create culturally driven programs. It helps us be better at hiring diverse employees and retaining those employees. We can have better onboarding procedures as well as professional development, etc. There's big changes going on in the United States, big demographic changes. And in some regards, it's a slow-moving drama, but we're ready for this fast action scene. We know that the white population is aging. We know that by 2044, whites will be the minority. We know that Asians are projected to surpass Hispanics as the largest immigrant group. Our voters are becoming more diverse. There's an increase in interracial marriages. There's more women in leadership positions. There's a decline in two-parent households. And there's a greater migration to the South by blacks. We also know that there's 4 states in the United States that are already minority majority states: California, Hawaii, New Mexico, and Texas. Minorities are the dominant demographic in those states. And soon, Nevada, Maryland, and Georgia will also be minority majority states. So our ability to adapt to change and respond to critical issues that affect people's lives and the nation's future is what Extension has done well for the past 100 years. The question is can we do this for the next 100 years? More and more of our issues are being influenced by globalization as well as their changing demographics. So a little background. So this started back in 2012 with the USDA and Mike McGurr and Patty Fulton, Hiram at that time. And USDA connected with University of Minnesota Extension and asked us to develop the community of practice. And we said, yeah, great, we'll do that. But we really need to figure out who is currently doing what. Who currently has work efforts abroad, as well as who currently is working with immigrant groups domestically. And we really wanted to focus on those wicked problems, those developmental challenges that we all face. And we wanted to be able to share ideas and build a stronger network. So we thought of community practice. And the whole idea was to influence our efforts abroad as well as domestically working together. So by building focusing on global dynamics and cultural knowledge into our programs, we can better respond to this increasingly diverse and interdependent domestic and global needs. And this happens by collaborating on projects and supporting our work efforts abroad. So that's just a little background. So I want to pause here and see if anyone has any questions at this point in time.
No questions at this time, Rene.
Okay. So we're moving into the exciting part of the presentation. I know this is very exciting. So we're going to talk about the design of the Global Network Survey. So if you have not completed the Global Network Survey, what you can do is you can send an email to me at gnetwork@umn.edu. That's gnetwork@umn.edu. And I will send you a link with your passcode. Okay, and so once you log in, you'll complete the survey, and then you will receive an annual reminder to update your network. So I'm going to go through the survey in some detail here, but I'll try to go through it quickly. So if you've already completed the survey, when you go to update your survey every year, you're actually asked to update your survey, or would you like to export some of the network data? So first I'm going to talk about the survey design, and then I'll show you how to access some of the data yourself. Okay. So the data that we're collecting in the survey really focuses on 6 areas. It's the type and focus of work, your experience, professional development needs and skills, language, your interest in the community of practice, and your networks. And you'll notice on the left-hand side here, let me get this, that's not working, but over here, that this is part of the survey. The part that's in red right now is the area that we're focusing on, but you can see we have verifying information, or verifying nomination, demographics, foreign countries, recent immigrants, professional development, current working network, and your network connections. Those are sections within the survey. So under verifying nomination, first question really is, do you really have this experience? Because someone has nominated you. Okay, someone has suggested, Rene, send so-and-so this email because they do have experience working in foreign countries or working with immigrants. And so you'll get this survey. And one of the first things you'll be asked is you'll be asked to confirm your identity. And this is one of the strengths of the database, is that the second you put your name in, you get to correct any misspelled words, you get to add your email, you get to put in your organization. That information is automatically added into the database. And so in future times, let's say you want to go in and identify me in your network, you can go through the drop-down box and I'll be there for you. So it builds on itself, which is really strong. And then another question is did your work efforts in a country other than the US, was it with recent immigrant groups or not? So you identify if your work efforts are with a foreign country and or with an immigrant group, okay? And so then if we look at demographics, the demographics section is just focusing on gender, languages, organization type, your position, if you have an extension appointment or not, where you're located by zip code, type of work, and subject area. So I'm just going to go over the type of work and subject area. So here's a list of the type of work. And this helps us identify who's completed the survey. Of course, if this is someone that has skills in grant management or evaluation or fundraising, for example, as well as our subject area. Do you have experience in agriculture, water, youth development, gender studies, and so forth? So you get to select up to 3 areas that represent your work. Then if we move on to foreign countries, we ask you to select up to 5 foreign countries that you have work efforts in. Okay, and what we're interested in knowing specifically about your work efforts in these countries is, are you working in the country? For example, I have work efforts in Sierra Leone, but I've never been to Sierra Leone. Do these work efforts occur within your position in extension or outside of extension? Has it occurred within the past 3 years? And did you work directly with the intended beneficiaries? So it helps us better understand what your work efforts are all about. And so we go through these questions for each country. Now, if you also selected that you have work efforts with immigrants domestically, you go through the same series of questions. Okay. So then our next section is professional development. And what we're interested in here is we're interested in what your professional development needs are, as well as what can you teach, right? Because we want to tap into you and your expertise. Some of you are experts in religion or evaluation, and we can use your expertise to improve our efforts abroad or domestically. And then, you know, if you're not interested in teaching, we want to make sure that we know that. So I'm not going to bug you and say, hey, help us out, even though you never want to. We also ask if you're interested in being part of the community of practice, the one domestically and or abroad. And based upon results, 94% of the people who have replied to the survey have indicated that they're interested in the community of practice, both domestically and abroad. And then asking questions about your degree of participation. So the next section is about your current working network. And this is the area that is really interesting for me because I love social network analysis. And it asks you to list the people who have contributed to your work and that are currently part of the U.S. Extension system or partnering with U.S. Extension. Okay? So you list all these people in your network. Okay? And this is where the survey can become a little cumbersome. Because once you list everyone, you'll get a question, and I have Andrea Bohn from Illinois. She's in my network. And so they ask me, you know, how important is this connection, right? You know, or actually, sorry, I made a mistake there, but what type of extension is it? Do we work together? Are we from the same office? Is it with foreign countries and so forth? And so I want to know a little bit about the connection, and then I want to know the importance of the connection. So is my relationship with Andrea, is it important to the success of my work? Yes or no, right? Because then I can do a social network analysis and I can see how important she is to my work or not. And if she's not important, that's okay, but I would like that to potentially change over time or not. So we can see the importance that people have. And through a social network analysis, we can actually identify key people that are really important in a lot of people's work. So of course, as you can imagine, Otto, Mike, and Patty from USDA are very important in people's networks. Finally, we ask a question about permission. I'm not interested in sharing your information if you don't want it shared. So that's what we have there. So that's pretty much the survey. So we're going to talk a little bit about analyzing the data, and I'll ask for a quick question here, but I have one thing first. And so we're going right back to the beginning of that network survey, right? So you're asked to update your survey, or you can export some data, right? Okay, so if you want to export the data, this is how you do it. You select the export the data link. There's a drop-down box, and you select the countries with data. Now, what we're able to share publicly is pretty much just a function of finance on how much we can afford to pay the database designer to develop the tool so it's easily accessible. So I selected Costa Rica. I select the Export Global Network Data tab, and an Excel spreadsheet gets downloaded. And in that Excel spreadsheet, this is the information I'll get. I'll get the name, the email address. It will say if this person has work efforts in Costa Rica. It will say yes or no if this person has work efforts with recent immigrants from Costa Rica. And so we know that 2 folks do. And then it will also list the subject areas that this person has expertise in, that they work in. Okay. And one thing that's really important is that the names that are downloaded, they do not include anyone who did not want their information shared. Okay. So we really want to honor people's requests.
Rene, there's a question in the chat box of why do you limit your network contacts to Extension? Many of my vital contacts are outside Extension.
Well, if your vital contacts are outside of Extension, are they partnering with Extension? because it's not limited to just extension, it's limited to extension, and if you're partnering with folks that are working with you in extension. And we did this because we're looking at U.S. Cooperative Extension System. That's why.
And then the other question was, I work with Native Americans. Obviously, they're not immigrants, but a valuable population. Should this work be considered in the context of the survey?
We had that discussion in the original design of it, and the challenge is, since there's over 566 Native nations across the U.S., we thought that we would actually need something separate to address Native nations, because it's so large that we didn't know how to handle it when it came right down to it. We had the same question and concern. Any other questions? Because now we're moving into even a more exciting phase of the webinar. It is the Snowball database. So the reason we call it Snowball is that, we sent a set of emails to about 50 folks that we knew had work efforts abroad or work efforts domestically. And they were asked to fill out the survey. And once they identified people in their network, those people received an email. So for example, if I identified Beth, Beth would have received an email that said, Rene thinks you're a superstar, please complete this survey for us. And I'm able to actually even identify if I want to know if anyone has identified me in their network as well. So it can be very interesting for you if that is what excites you or not. So let's take a look at the survey. So there's actually, the database. There's two big features behind this database. Okay, so one of the features is being able to extract the data, okay? And being able to send out mass emails. So under the Survey Takers tab, under Choice here, I'm able to extract data. I'm able to understand or see the answers people gave in the survey, who their network is, and be able to pull data based upon questions and answers. Now these other four, the question, choices, emails, surveys, and lookup tables, those are tools that I use to actually develop the survey questions. Tools to help me send out automatic reminder emails. Also a tool to create a whole new survey if I wanted to. So the person who asked about Native nations, we could create a whole new survey within the Snowball database that's based upon people's work in Native nations within this tool. Okay, with what it and the value is that things update automatically for us. And so the two big features, being able to extract data and being able to develop the survey tool.
So Rene, can I just clarify then? So because the surveys have already been created and people are supposed to be updating their information in the database every year, you could run the exact same survey tool several times based on new data that's modified every year. Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
Yeah. And so, okay, like for example, in the subject area where people work, I put in an other. So that other feature is kind of like bittersweet, right? It's really been frustrating because there's so many other categories, but it's also highlighted a few that I need to include in the list, right? So that means I could revise the survey that people use based upon that. But those are decisions I don't want to make in a vacuum on my own. And so I'm hoping that perhaps someone on this webinar, a few folks that are interested in working through those details with me. But we could add a completely new survey tool, whole new thing, goes to a whole new different group of people or anything we want. So now, when we look around that list that has to do with the survey takers, right? So this is survey takers. I get to see a list of everyone who's in the network. So here's John Brines, my colleague. He's the director of our global initiatives at the University of Minnesota here. I'm able to remove him if I want to. If I get mad at John, I'll do that. Or let's say his email changes, or oftentimes people retire, so I end up removing them from the list, or people change jobs so they have a new email address or a new organization. I'm able to look at one person's answers and details, and I'm able to look at what kind of emails were sent to John. So what we know already about John is that if you look over here, some of his questions were answered, yes. He was an email node, which means he got an email saying someone identified him. And he was never sent a reminder email, which means John is like the best survey taker ever. And he updated his data back in February of this year. So he is like a great survey taker. So send him your surveys. So then we can look at survey taker answers. So here I can get the specific answers to all the questions that John answered. So we know that John speaks French, Swahili, and Serer, right? We know he's an administrator, and we know that the 3 categories of work that represent him are administration, extension, education, and grant management. So I can look at all the answers. I can print these answers off, and I can only show and review them, right? I can't change them because it's not my place. So now we can take a look at the survey takers network. So this is interesting. What we're seeing here is we're seeing John, and he identifies who's in his network. So we know that he's identifying Jean Allen, Harriet Paul, Hiram, Mike, Pete, right? So he's identified those folks in his network. But if we look over here, Greg, Michael, and Lori have identified John in their network. So I'm able to just look at the networks, which is kind of powerful and interesting when you put it in a social network analysis tool. And then you can see the connections and some centrality and interesting questions you can ask. Once again, I can only review and I can show this information. Now this part of the database is a little confusing and complicated. It's a very powerful page of the database. It's the export. What can we export from the database here? Or there's a lot we can export. And so between the red lines are different tools we can do. So within number 1, we're exporting Excel survey data with strength question. This is just the network strength, right? Even though I can look through the drop-down box and see all the other questions, this is only pulling the network strength. So I can find out who's connected to who and how important was their relationship with each other. That's it, just the strength. So the next thing I can extract is the permission questions. Now this is really important, right? This is so important specifically for the folks that do not want their information shared. So this is always pulled down before I share or I do any presentation with people's names that can be seen, because I don't want to ignore that. So if we look at number 3, this is exporting Excel data, survey answers. This is our raw data. This includes all the questions in the survey except your network connections, okay? But it does include the number of connections you have, okay? So we can pull that data out. And then if we look at number simple questions, and simple questions are closed-ended questions, right? These are the questions that are not based upon or expanded on because of another question, right? So these are just our closed-ended questions, so that's what I'm pulling out. And then we can export our referenced questions, and our referenced questions are the answers to questions that are cross-referenced. And so those are the network questions, but any other question that's based upon a previous question. Let me know if you have any questions. And then we have 2 more tools down at the bottom here. So we can export selected survey questions to a CSV, and that's comma separated value. So it's not an Excel database. It's an Excel, but it's data that's used commas to separate it out. But we're only getting selected question from this list, right? All the questions. See the scroll down bar? I can scroll all the way down. And so I select my questions that I'm really interested in. And so I can select multiple questions at a time to look at. So I could look at foreign countries and immigrant groups and professional development need, for example. So just based upon what you're interested in doing. And then the last one on our survey export, our data export, is selected survey questions, and then this is an Excel expanded pivot table. So it's just pulling the same data but presenting it in a different format. So that's a lot of data to be able to export. And we still have more. So,
Mark, there's one question in the Q&A, Mark. Can you see that? What do we do with
Yeah,
that?
I can. Sheila says, if I don't currently work with these audiences and locations, how can I have access to this information to advise and mentor from others?
So for clarification, the question is, if I do not have work efforts abroad, and if I do not work with race and immigrant groups, how can I have access to the data so I can help people I work with? Is that correct?
Well, Sheila, if you want to clarify a bit or add more detail in chat, feel free to do so. But
And I can't see the chat, Sheila, just so you know.
okay, yeah, and I'll look for that there. I think probably, to the bigger question of access in general, I would think there's a lot of people who would love to get access to this data, but I'm sure there's some privacy concerns with regard to just giving it out to anyone, right?
Yeah, that's why that permission question is there, and that's what
Okay.
I want to honor no matter what.
Yeah. Sheila says, I want to work in this area and make connections.
Well, what you can do is you can complete the survey with, which basically would be one question, and you would answer no, and you'd be in the network, but you wouldn't be connected to anyone at this point in time. So then you would have access to what's publicly available right now if you're part of the network. And hopefully in the future we'll be able to share more and more data, because I think that this data is important to help make informed decisions. I don't think you make a decision based upon the data. I just think it can inform your decisions.
And I mean, just real quick from a networking standpoint, like in Sheila's case, she signs up, she doesn't have any connections. If people list her as a connection, she may say, oh, I didn't know, let's say me, I'm in there and I've got these connections and I list her as a connection. Maybe she, I didn't know that person had international connections, or I didn't know they were working with migrants. So I guess from that standpoint, it is a way to make new connections in these areas.
Okay. So the next export tool is, we call it, basically we're able to filter the data, right? So we can filter the data in two ways. One is we limit the data by questions and answer. So for example, in this one, I am using the question verifying your country. So I'm interested in people that said they had work efforts in Kenya. And so I can export that data. I can get the list of everyone who says that they have work efforts in Kenya. I can add another question or not, right? And I can combine it as an and or. So I can pull that data down based upon questions and specific answers. So for example, I'm interested in people who have professional development experience in marketing. Let's say we needed to do a webinar marketing. I could find the folks that said that they were interested, that number one, that they will share their information, that number two, they're interested in being part of this, and number three, they have expertise in marketing. So we have that data. And then the second thing here is then we can also look at up to 4 questions. We can pull the data down for 4 specific questions and export that data. So it's just different ways that we have the ability to export data that we're interested in based upon the survey. So what we know now as of May 11th, a few days ago, is that the survey has snowballed to 980 people. So 980 people have received an invitation to complete the survey. Now, only 451 have completed the survey. So there's 529 people out there who are getting reminder emails every year who must be pissed off at me, or they're retired, or they just don't want to be part of the network, or, survey taking is cumbersome. I understand that. But they're in the network. So I cannot pull data from them. I have no idea what their expertise is. I have no idea what languages they speak. I do know who they're connected to, right? So for example, if I said Beth, and Beth never completed the survey, but if I said, I know Beth because of our work efforts in Mali, West Africa, Beth is in the network, even though she never responded to the survey, right? But I don't show her name. I can look at it because I've got the keeper of the database, but that stays private. So they're in the network, yet we can't pull data. I don't know if that makes sense. And so these are the answers we have. So we have most of the answers in U.S. We got some over in Europe, it looks like, and Hawaii, Alaska, Pacific Islands there. And then if we look at continental U.S., you'll see the breakdown of where people are responding. Majority of the folks that are responding to the survey are from the East Coast, and we have about 50 folks from the West Coast. I mean, we can look at very details and go state by state if we want to, but that just gets a little visually complicated. So how can you participate? Well, one, if you haven't completed the survey, send an email to me at gnetwork@umn.edu, and I will set you up. You can connect on Facebook. We have a Facebook site where people are sharing resources and their experiences if they're doing trainings with groups domestically or groups abroad. And what's nice about this community practice is that it cuts across all the disciplines in extension. It's not just about agriculture. We have youth development, family development, community development, natural resources involved in the network. Because really, to address the wicked issues and the challenges that we're facing globally, we need to work across disciplines. You can also join the E-Extension Internationalizing Extension group. And if you're not part of E-Extension, one of the first steps you need to do is you actually need to sign up. And you do that at people.extension.org, sign up. And that way you can join the Internationalizing Extension, COP, as well as many other community practices that E-Extension hosts.
And we also wanted to let folks know that, Rene, you have been in the process of putting stuff back up there. It was the stuff on the site was actually depopulated because it wasn't being used.
Yeah.
So Rene is putting stuff back on there. So if you're interested in this, please go there and look and open up the documents and at least, see what's being used so it can stay up there. But we are in the process, Rene is in the process of repopulating the website.
Yeah, what happened is when we created it, E-Extension did an internal audit, and so they removed things that weren't accessed in so many months. And since we were so new, basically nothing was really accessed. And I just haven't gotten to it. And so what I want to hear from you guys, is, why do we care? What are some ways you would like to use the data? How would you like to get involved? Or any other questions that you have that I can help with? And I want to minimize this.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions. Catherine says, can you give us a quick overview of the goals of the community of practice? Why was it formed?
Well, the goals of the community practice really focuses on creating a workforce that's prepared and capable to participate in addressing these global development challenges. Also, to have programs that we're incorporating global dynamics and cultural knowledge into our education, our research, and our outreach activities of extension. And also to improve organizational efficiency and effectiveness through sharing resources and ideas and cooperating throughout our U.S. extension system. I mean, we have a unique ability across the U.S. cooperative extension system to actually harness us to address some global issues together. I know on a state level, we do a really good job if there's a flood or if there's an invasive species where we rally around and we respond very quickly. But imagine if we work together as a big national organization to respond to some of these global issues that affect us all locally. So I'm not sure if I answered that. But.
Okay. Mary says, remind folks about the Facebook page. I put a link in chat for the Facebook page, so people should be able to get to that there.
Somebody clicked on it. Can you check that, Mark? Somebody clicked on it. It says can't be found.
On the
Just make sure
Facebook
it's
page? Yeah,
typed
let's
correctly.
see. I was able to click on it.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
The
you may
other
have to
thing too,
click on the people.extension.org /communities. You will have to be logged in to get to that page. So,
Renee, can you talk a little bit about what you and I had talked about in terms of we're looking for more people who want to really advance their leadership in running some of this stuff? Can you talk about that? We need like the next generation, if you will, or sustainability plan.
So, since 2012, we've had kind of two teams. We had a leadership team, and the leadership team designed the network survey and worked to design the database, right? And so that group had a specific project. We finished it, we were done. And then we put together a design team, and that design team we put together was based upon, after we launched the survey, people's interest. And so I literally went through everyone who responded to the survey and sorted through the folks that said that they were interested in being on this team, and then looked at their background. And so we created a design team that cut across all the disciplines in extension, as well as cut across certain skills like evaluation, program development and design, and grant making, for example. And we created this design team, and we actually have a strategic plan. We mapped it all out. Mike McGarrett was there, this big gigantic map with all these strategies and actions that we can take place. Now the next step is to really put together an implementation team. So, we put together the Facebook site and the e-extension site, and it's kind of wishy-washy, not much is happening. So the question that I think about is like, can we get an implementation team that really wants to push forward the community of practice? And then upon reflection, I think, well, is the community of practice really the right way to go? I don't know. I mean, e-extension tried to get people to work across universities to share resources and be efficient. And we seem to do a really good job at a regional level, maybe not yet at a national level. I don't know. But, trying to pull people together to help take it to that next state. And I don't know where that is, because I don't want to be making those decisions in a vacuum, because that's just not right. So did I answer that okay, Beth?
I hope so, because we're hoping that this will entice a couple folks to say, hey, I want to learn more information, or I want to get involved, or I know someone who should be involved. And for those folks to contact Renee in some regard, because even I'm the chair of the Global Relations Committee for Epsilon Sigma Phi, and we struggle with this about how to keep the nation connected in some of these issues. And I'm thankful for those that if there are international opportunities, and some of these have just been kind of for educational travel opportunities, that's kind of the most things that have been relayed to me. But then I can get them out to our audience and to my network of people. And also using Mike McGirr at the national office to sort of get his stuff out there too. So I think the challenge is, how do we connect people to learn more about and share information about what they're looking for and what they've learned through their international experiences, however you want to define that. And I think that's a challenge. How do we keep that sustainable? How do we keep that conversation sustainable?
Well, I mean, especially with globalization and our changing demographics, I believe that for us to be relevant into the future, we need to be able to incorporate global dynamics and cultural knowledge into our programming, research, and outreach. We need to be able to do that, and do that well.
Otto says, hi, Renee, how has the data been useful thus far?
It's a good question. I'm not quite sure I'm the person to ask. I mean, I've done some interesting social network analysis and have done several webinars sharing the data. I have looked at the data for some personal or professional work when we're working abroad to see who else has work efforts in Morocco, for example, if we should connect with them, or in Kenya, for example. And I know that a handful of people have downloaded the data from the network, Global Network Survey from the website, and I'm not quite sure how they're using the data. It's very interesting, though. I did a social network analysis. I've done two because it's quite cumbersome. And when we look at trying to feed the future, that's like this big initiative. the network in agriculture, the plant and animal networks are right on top of each other. They work really close together. But they are not connected that well with post-harvest. They're not connected with water, and they're not connected with climate or gender. And for us to feed the future, I believe we all have to be working together. And so then what is our role to get people working together? Because we can look at that data and I can tell you who the bridgers are, who are the people who are crossing different networks. Do we pull those people together and come up with a strategy to be successful in our work efforts? Or do we continue to work in our silos, right? Because we still get credit for working in our silos. And so that's the challenge.
Lee says, what resources exist that can help people convince reluctant administrators to support this kind of global work?
Well, Lee,
that's the $62,000 question,
well,
right?
Yeah. John Brines and I, we are doing presentations locally. I've also I've done several webinars, and I've presented recently in North Carolina State at their Partnering with New and Immigrant Audiences conference, as well as Colorado State, about the importance of this. We talk about globalization, we talk about the US demographics, and then specific state demographics and how things are changing and the value of doing this work and why we need to do this work into the future. Because if you just look at the changing demographics, it's a no-brainer. We need to be doing this work.
Is there any administrator online that, I don't know if we have the raise your hand capability here, that could share their ideas on that?
We do. If someone wants to let us know in chat, I can promote. If you have a working microphone on your computer, we'd be glad to, assuming Rene and Beth are okay with it. If you want to join the conversation, yeah, just let us know in chat, or let me know in chat, and I can promote you.
And I think also, too, the other thing, if anybody is an administrator that could help answer Lee's question, that'd be helpful. And if anybody has used the database that Rene has, let us know that as well, and we can open you up to kind of share some of your information.
Okay, Toby says, are there efforts underway to encourage the development of volunteer opportunities within the database? I think there may be states who have connections in other countries, but they may lack staff in their own system. How can we connect the international opportunities with interested volunteers, no matter where in extension they work?
Well, thanks, Toby from Minnesota, for that question. It's a great question. I know that in Minnesota, we're sharing opportunities, be it, the farmer to farmer or things that we're aware of. I think that's a great question to answer and a great resource that the database could be used for to make those connections. But there's nothing underway that I know of nationally right now to make that connection.
Rene, did you feel like with a system like this, it seems like certainly the more people that sign up, the better the system is going to be, the more activity is that. That's something. So I think what I'll do is we do, E-Extension sends out we send out at least one weekly email blast, and we normally do have a webinars section, in case you missed it kind of section. If you'd like to, we'll talk after the webinar, but we can get out, make sure this webinar is on the list there, and then also in the little blurb underneath there, have a link to sign up to the system, or with instructions, or wherever you'd like the email link to go to. But that may help with efforts to, just get folks.
Thanks, that would be great.
Yeah.
The data is only as powerful as the people who complete it, and it's only as useful as people who choose to use it. If I was funding a project in Kenya, I would look at this list and see who's working in Kenya. And I would ask them, why are they not working together? Because I can go country by country, and I can show you who's working together and who's not working together. And the question is why. All right, and oftentimes it's because we didn't know, but then also it's because it's not what's necessarily valued in our system. So this is a change, and I know E-Extension, I think, has struggled with this as well.
Are you gathering any social networking stuff? I didn't see any Twitter links. I didn't see any Facebook links, that kind of thing. Or has that been part of the conversation with regard to contact information and those kind of things?
Well, we have our Facebook page. We don't do Twitter.
Well, but for when an individual signs up, though, if I go in and sign up, I can put my Twitter handle in. I can put my Facebook account. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, we can make that change. It's a great idea, actually.
I mean, I'm just thinking from a networking standpoint. I found it. I've gotten where the last few years, I'll quickly, if I want to contact somebody, I'll just sort of hit them. I'll just sort of hit a tweet out and sort of as a ping to see if this person's interested, or I can make contact. Sometimes that's a way to. It's a nice way to make initial contact with people.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And this is the kind of help that I need for this to be successful and useful for folks. All right.
Well, I'm curious about. We'll wait. Let's see. Chuck actually put a lengthy something in chat. Let's see.
Oh yeah, Chuck wrote some good stuff there.
I'll just sort of read this off. Again, I like to do it. I know folks that are live can see it, but for the benefit of maybe someone who might be watching this after the fact, related to the question about value of system, this example from Long became the COP, but many serve as a sample. I connected several years ago with a couple of international extension related systems that proved to be a great benefit to me on a professional study leave, and then I was able to be a resource for to folks from those organizations on future leaves by their members. I have hosted several on study leaves and helped them arrange resources here to assist them. This gives professional value besides program value.
Great.
Okay. Matt says, can the network help find funding in certain countries?
Sure.
Money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, if we really want to use this network and if we really want to change the way that we work, considering our demographic changes and considering globalization, there's opportunities. And funding clearly is one of them. I think funding is what kind of separates us right now. And so how do you flip that?
So from a development standpoint, I'm thinking like software development wise, it sounds like you've got some flexibility with regard to if you get feedback and we say, hey, we'd like to make this change to the system, you have the ability to do that?
Yeah, and so every time that I get a hold of a small chunk of change, that's how I was able to share the data that folks can export now from the website.
So is this development work going on at Minnesota, or the developers, the people writing?
Yeah, this is just Minnesota. So we originally got a chunk of change from USDA and that ran out, and then Minnesota, we invested our own dollars, and then I invested some more of our own dollars. And at this point, you know, I can't commit more dollars, and so it'd be nice if others want more dollars. And so that would be, you know, people applying for a grant, put in a couple grand in a budget line to support the Internationalizing Extension community of practice. You know, if you need to disseminate and distribute your findings, use the community of practice as your forum to disseminate and distribute your findings. You'll be able to cut across universities and not have to travel. So there's ways to do it. And these are great questions. And this is where I would love to bring in and talk to people and figure this out as a group. Because it's, yeah, like I've said, you know, needs to be done by more folks.
Yeah, because you'll get that as part of the survey. So if you guys could really, with some of the survey questions, you know, really be directive in terms of what you're looking for the next step or how you could be involved, that would be really helpful, and we can help connect you people, and then also connect with Rene and the other sources that are out there. So that will be part of the survey too. So please make sure to look for the survey in the next couple of days.
Are folks interested in seeing some of the network maps? I mean, I think we have 5 minutes. I can pull up some maps real quick if anybody wants to see some maps.
Do it.
Sure.
Okay. So confirm, Mark, that you see a map of a lot of dots.
That looks like something, a craft that my mom used to work on way back in the day.
Yeah, this is
the yarn and string.
It's a lot of pipe cleaners and puffballs going on there. So the blue dots are content areas and the red dots are people, right? And so what we have here is we have these networks. Let me see if I get this over. So right now I'm highlighting water, natural resources, economic development, and community development, because this was a presentation for the natural resources and the community development folks at their conference last year out in Vermont. And so, but you can also see that we have climate and agriculture post-harvest that's here. And then egg animals are here. I don't even know where egg plants are. So we're looking at agriculture, we have youth development, but let's see what we have. Here's community development. So these are all the people that are working in community development. And you can see who's networked, who's connected to who. So I haven't looked at this data. I'm just pulled up an old PowerPoint. Natural resources. Clearly the folks in community development are a little bit more networked than those in natural resources. So you have all these people working independently.
And if you click on an individual square, does a person come up?
Not in this, but
okay.
I use UCINet, and so I can look at an individual square. I can pull up your name, Beth, and do your whole network and look at your network. So it depends upon what we want to look at when we do the social network analysis. I use a software called UCINet.
Okay.
So it just takes it. You have to pull this all together. And so here's the water network. So what's interesting is who is this, right? So if I was trying to do some work in water, I'd probably figure out who this person was, this person, these two people, because they're a little connected. They could maybe pull in more folks, right? This is foreign countries and people, right? So the people are red dots and the foreign countries are blue. And when you're looking at these maps, the network is only a snapshot in time. Okay, and so you always look at the center of the network, but you look at it in 4 quadrants as well. And so I pulled up data about the top 10 countries that there are work efforts in, and so we can look at the top 10 countries. So Mexico, Costa Rica, and China are the top 3. Then I look at Mexico and the people, so we can see what's going on in Mexico. And then I'm sure I must have done Mexico and community development. And so you can look at the data in a variety of ways based upon what you're interested in. And it's interesting, and it's only useful if you use it, right? So if I was working in Mexico, I would probably email all these folks and see if they're interested in working together, right? And I would probably maybe call up some of these folks, because there's a little network going on here. What is going on with these folks? Right? Here's the natural resources in Mexico. So what's going on with this small group of people? Do they work at the same university or not? Right? Are they working in the same content area of natural resources or not? And then it looks like I went through every country, Costa Rica, and so on. So I know we only have a couple more minutes left, so any other questions?
We have one, Nancy. Nancy says, can you share the survey link again? I thought I did the survey, but don't remember getting the yearly update requests, so maybe not. Is there any interest in retirees being involved? For example, the program I did was years ago, but I still have a viable contact who is continuing the program in that country.
So it's gnetwork@umn.edu. Let me put it in the chat.
Yeah, I put it up higher in the chat initially when it first started, but people might not have seen it.
So there's the email to get into the network. And if you're already in the network, I'll let you know. And then I'll resend your password and everything for you.
And also I put my email in there too, folks, in case you want to email me with more thoughts or the next steps or anything like that. But like I said, I'll be getting everybody out a survey here in the next 2 to 3 days. So it's eac9@cornell.edu.
And Nancy, in regards to your question, I mean, that's up to everyone else in the network if they'll find that interesting. And so depending upon what the country is, you can pull down that data and share your contact.
All right. I think
we're at the top of the hour. I'll put a link real quick. Again, the Learn event, a link to the recording will be available there within a few days. So feel free to share that with other colleagues or friends who might not have been able to attend. And as Beth said, she's going to take the registration information you guys used, and she'll be sending out a survey within a couple of days.
And thanks all. Thanks, Mark, for setting this up, and Renee for actually. We've been connecting for quite a while here, so I'm glad this finally came to fruition here. This is great.
Well, thank you very much, Mark and Beth, and I hope everyone has a fantastic day.
Yes, thank you everyone for participating. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, you guys. If you have
Thanks,
any
folks.
questions, give me an email.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye.